Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are here on a kind of a really cool little webinar here. We brought in two of our favorite partners. XenTegra has a lot of partners, but two of my favorite that I love working with is Nerdio and IGEL. And we're going to be going over a problem that I'm hearing a lot, and that is Windows 11. We have a ticking clock that's coming up here, and I'm joined with Phil Renee, Nerdio SE. Phil, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank
No
you
worries.
for having me. Appreciate it.
And no problem. And Chris Feeney with IGEL. How you doing, Chris?
Doing well. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. So, hey, I think we talked about this before when we were setting this up, and of course, and just trying to understand this a little bit more. I have clients constantly telling me that they have to try to basically upgrade to Windows 11 if they don't want to, in some cases, because everything else is working great, or because they have to because of support. And I really would love to help these people out. Let's find different ways to be smart about it, and really hoping that's what we get out of this whole thing. So before we go into that, I would be amiss to say, who is XenTegra? Who's bringing you this wonderful webinar here? XenTegra, the company I work for, is a VAR, but not your typical VAR, right? Value-added reseller. We're going to be what we like to think of as this incredible value-added reseller that brings in all of these partners, like the ones that you see here in Nerdio and IGEL, and helps our customers and our clients really understand the problems that they have and all the different ways they can solve it. We're not going to just be like, hey, you need to upgrade Windows 11. Let's find different ways to do that, and let's be smart about it as well, where they can save money and, of course, maybe have a better solution. But more importantly, we can bring these type of discussions to the front and center. All right, and we do that with our one-stop shop with consulting, hosting. We're one of the few VARs that has an MSP as well, reseller. We provide support, and we do so many different things, and would love to have a conversation with anybody watching. You can always email us at info@xentegra.com at the bottom of your screen. All right, so that covers all of my fun stuff, other than the famous NASCAR slide here. This is just some of the partners we work with. Again, love Nerdio and IGEL, but like to just see that we cover a gambit of different things. So, you name it. Of course, I have to say AI at least once every one of these videos. I think that's how I get paid. We cover AI, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and everything in between, but we'll definitely find you the right partner for the right solution. And that's always important. But let's get to the ticking clock, right? Cue the Mission Impossible theme, right? Do. Phil, Chris, everybody's worried about this Windows 11 ticking clock. Have you guys been hearing about it? How have you guys been dealing with it in the field?
Maybe I'll just start by saying, a lot of what we've been dealing with as Nerdio, and just a little bit of context on what Nerdio is, we sit as
Sure, please.
a management layer on top
Okay.
of Azure, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about all of the different things that you can do with Azure between AVD, 365, Intune, right? It becomes a big ecosystem. We bring it all together. We put automations around it in order to sort of deliver what you're looking to do, right? Now, in the context of what you were asking, right, we deal with a lot of customers that are dealing with hardware compatibility issues. They just have trouble with cloud readiness in general,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even software packaging. There are a lot of unknowns in terms of sort of that transition. We're seeing that users have up to a third, if not more, of the hardware that they're trying to use is not compatible with Windows 11. So
Sure.
it becomes a big issue.
And Chris, I should definitely ask, can you tell us a little bit more about IGEL? Obviously, we'll talk more about the value of IGEL as we will with Nerdio, but if you tell a little bit about that, and of course, how you're dealing with the Windows 11 upcoming situation.
Yeah, thanks again, JP. And so where we sit is on the endpoint, the actual device the user is going to sit down and keyboard mouse it into a resource that they're going to use. And in this case, we're referring to obviously Windows 11, but more specifically coming from a cloud scenario. And obviously Microsoft over the last many years has introduced a new set of products to the market with Azure Virtual Desktop, multi-session options, single session, and then of course their sort of little brother, I suppose, but also becoming a bigger brother. Windows 365 cloud PCs, different models, and Nerdio can help on the management side with either of those options. Where IGEL sits is on the device itself that you're going to use to access it. We often say, why manage Windows twice? Why manage Windows on the endpoint?
Yeah.
And where IGEL is, I mean, we've been around for 25 years, right? We are a secure endpoint operating system built from the ground up, always with security in mind. It wasn't an afterthought. It is fundamentally, it's Linux. It's our version of Linux built to be managed at scale. And so if I wanted to simplify it, it's a secure endpoint operating system with a management tool that works. That works part is really key. We can also say we've never been compromised in a cyber attack. That is true, and we are very diligent about that in everything we do. Security is what we lead with, and then it's sort of bringing in that management layer. At the end of the day, delivering a digital workspace that the user can function and work out of. Obviously, Windows is a very familiar interface to get to your applications. And today's discussion is to be, around how you can take that in a scenario where the endpoint can't maybe make the move to Windows 11, can't do the upgrade because the TPM chip isn't there or doesn't have enough hard drive or RAM. Well, you can consume it. But do you need to take that device and, it might be destined for the dumpster? We're saying time out.
Right.
Because we can actually bring additional value by just putting a different OS on there managed to get you into that environment. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today on this conversation.
No problem. And Phil, just to go back to you real quick here, can you tell us the different places that Nerdio fits? For example, I know we know it's Azure Virtual Desktop, but is there any other kind of places that somebody should look for Nerdio? Again, we're going to the cost savings piece here as well, but can you talk a little bit more about what additional kind of environments you work in and what licenses they need to have for Nerdio to work?
Yeah, so if you're looking for for management of your Azure infrastructure, right? So we sit with that Azure stack, and even if you're doing Azure local, right, we can help you manage that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using Intune, right, we can bring a digital visibility and management to sort of that space, especially if you're looking to roll in, all of those either new or repurposed devices into sort of the Intune management system. We can give you a lot of visibility and a lot of sort of differentiators and things that you can't find in other places by using Nerdio. When you're talking about 365, there's a lot that we can do to sort of extend value when you're talking about just image management in general, which can be a huge headache, especially when you're trying to do those transitions. Nerdio brings a lot of really powerful tools around that too. So, we fit in a lot of different spaces, but we also bring those spaces together. So it can be a nicer ecosystem when you're using Nerdio.
Sounds great. All right. So, I think Chris kind of alluded to it. Way to skip ahead, Chris. Apparently, you read the back of the book already. How do we avoid this hardware refresh trap, Chris? Because like you said, we don't want people to just throw away the hardware that they've already invested, especially if there's a way to prolong its life. Everybody's trying to squeeze that additional dollar, and IT can really be a hero here. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Chris?
Sure. And generally, what we're speaking to is the typical device refresh cycle. For many years, it's often that 3 to 5 year time frame. Mm-hmm. We know, for example, that many of those laptops that were bought, in a hurried state in 2020 when the pandemic kind of entered our world, right. They're now, 5 years later up for renewal, and some of them can't make the leap to the next version of Windows. And so where IGEL comes in is we can replace Windows at the endpoint. And we do that by repurposing the device, by installing our OS, blowing away what's there and just putting our operating system on it. Now it's a desktop operating system, so it's got the familiar start menu and other things you might expect from any desktop OS. But it's designed, as I mentioned, with security in mind, to be protecting against those endpoint attacks, right? There are many studies out there, many examples, but 90% of the attacks that come in from like a cyber ransomware kind of scenario are targeted at the endpoint where the user lives. And we're designed to prevent a lot of that. And so you layer in that security piece, and then it's like, okay, now we have the integrations to get you to these Microsoft products, whether it's through our AVD client, which we've built in concert with, working with Microsoft directly, as well as the Windows 365 option. And so by repurposing those devices, you can extend the life of them, even another few years. You can still leverage the webcam, the microphones. It doesn't have to have a TPM chip either. In many cases, they don't require it. In fact, if you're going to run Windows in the cloud, Microsoft had to add support for virtualizing the TPM. But you don't need that physically on the device. So IGEL can come in and help you rethink your endpoint strategy in general. And it often starts with what you already own.
So another piece there, Chris, that I think is really interesting, and you may have touched on it, but I really want to kind of underline it there, is how much lighter is the IGEL OS compared to the Windows OS? Again, nothing knocking the Windows, OS. We work with Microsoft all the time, and obviously Nerdio is a very tight partner with Microsoft. But how much lighter is that OS, especially for, as you talk about these older, hardware systems that we're trying to give a new life to?
That's a great question. So just to give you an example, right? The size of the OS itself when you go to install it, right? On average, IGEL, the OS, we just need about maybe 2 gigs of space. The actual download is just under 2 gigs.
Okay.
So it's very small. Where you compare that to the size of Windows 11, and there are different flavors of it, but just say on average, you're looking at maybe 40 to 50 gigs of disk space just needed for that. Then what's running, right? In fact, this morning I was looking at all the services that are running on my Windows device. Some are automatically starting up, but there's a number of services. And now what ports are being used to communicate with some of those services. Some of the stuff goes out to the cloud, like OneDrive app or whatever. IGEL, we don't have a lot of that at all. In fact, there's really only one port, and it's the management port. That's being used to manage and talk to the device. And so there's fundamental differences with just the way we've been designed. Again, I like to say it from when I started here 8 years ago. Our founder often shared, it was designed to be run in an untrusted environment like the internet.
Right.
So from the ground up, we're going to be almost invisible because there's not much there. In fact, many of the customers I worked with early on, federal government, they would scan the devices and they'd be like, we're not finding anything.
Right.
And there, it was by design.
Right.
Can you open it up a little bit more? No, that's not by design, but what do you want to do? So
you did talk about the size of the file and of course, what happens once you install it, but I would love to go on to one other piece that always is on top of mind when we talk about older hardware is RAM. But how much RAM do you need? Because obviously we all know the more RAM you have, the faster things go. But let's talk about the RAM usage that for IGEL's OS.
Sure. So we at a minimum 2 gigs, just to be
Right.
So x86 64-bit devices, what we're talking about, not ARM devices, but
Sure,
x86 64-bit. We can do 2 gigs. That's not a lot of horsepower. We would recommend at a minimum 4 gigs. And then, of course, how much disk space do we actually need once it's installed? A lot of that depends on what are you going to be getting to. Right. We don't require a ton. We can use more of the hard drive that as needed, but we don't require much at all. But I'd say a minimum 4 gigs of RAM. I've got mini laptops. Like I've got one of my favorites is my LG Gram. It's just got 8 gigs of RAM and a 256 hard drive, and that gives me plenty. I use it all the time to get into AVD, or I've got a cloud PC. Mm-hmm. Battery life is exceptional. I use it all day long. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. It's light as a feather.
Wait, Chris, you work for IGEL or do you work for? Okay, I just wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if that was a hardware sales.
No, disclaimer: we're doing this on my HP laptop.
It's fine.
But I also have my Lenovo sitting right next to me, so I'm ubiquitous. But I love the LG Gram. No problem. There's some great ones out there as well. So
and I think the other thing too, and you skipped ahead on me. I didn't give you a script, but I'm joking about that. But the ARM chips as well, right? That's a lot of government agencies, a lot of people in the field are using ARM because of the great battery life, and the fact that you guys can also work on ARM chips as well is such a key point. And you guys have,
Well, I want to be clear on that. We are looking at that right now. We don't have a product that is designed to install on ARM-based devices, but it is something that an emerging area, which is interesting here, is in the OT space, right? The
Right.
operational technology. And
Yep.
so a lot of those devices are ARM based. And so we are actually looking at that right now. We'll have more to share at our upcoming Now and Next in Frankfurt, Germany, coming up in
Right.
November. But officially, the product that is on the market is for x86 64
Okay.
devices.
Sorry about that. I didn't.
No
now,
worries.
now I'm skipping ahead. But yeah, for anybody watching that maybe doesn't understand OT, think about, again, easiest way to think about it is oil and gas, right? If you have a ton of pipelines, anything that's kind of a physical infrastructure, anything outside of the data center, typically that's hardware that's not typically monitored, is a great point to be broken into, right? Hacked. If you think about the Target hack that occurred many years ago, they used the the web-enabled thermostat AC unit to get in. So definitely, I love the idea of the OTs going after that. And I know IGEL's doing that as well. So thanks so much for that, Chris. Now, of course, we left you just kind of shaking your head there, Phil. We wanted to ask you a bunch of questions as well, but as we're kind of doing these pieces here. I think there's definitely a lot of great things that we could be talking about here. Automating your Windows 11 image deployment, managing desktops at scale. Can you talk to me a little bit more about what you're seeing, especially with this Windows 11 move, and tell me a little bit more how Nerdio is helping?
Yeah, you have a lot of customers that are running the different challenges when they're doing sort of these transitions, right?
Right.
In general, sort of, the older way of, image management can be very, very time consuming. Nerdy has a lot of tools that are built in to allow you to really reduce that time. In terms of image management time, just, admin, administration, we reduce that time quite a bit. I mean, we're looking, anywhere between 50, to 70%, right? And the way we do that is by allowing you to sort of create repositories, pull in different repositories to deploy applications. We do all of your sys prepping, sort of those actions we take for you. Even when you're talking about sort of building out different image, different images in general, right? That is especially when you're transitioning away from sort of your on-prem infrastructure, there can be a lot of compatibility issues, especially when you're looking to transition away from, Windows 10, right? Even one thing to just keep in mind, even like Windows 10 multi-session, right? You can't really upgrade that, right? The best way to navigate that is by building out fresh new images, right? That's where Nerdio steps in. We have the automations. We have the ability to deploy out those applications, deploying out scripts as well. That's sort of a big part of the ecosystem. We can actually automate your Windows updates, right? Things like that really sort of help, take that time commitment down quite a bit, especially if you're building out different use cases in that transition, right? When you're transitioning, you have, the needs to meet a lot of different, use cases. That being said, you want to be able to test those things and transition smoothly. So, Nerdio gives you the bandwidth to be able to attack those different issues.
So, so on top of the Nerdio cost savings calculator that, we use quite a bit because, and a lot of times it always makes me smile because of the fact that people are like, well, are these real numbers and, and all these types of things because they don't realize how many things that Nerdio can automate for them and how many things that they can just make happen because of their optimization pieces there. I'm not going to say it's magical, right? Because, obviously it's all IT and it's a lot of great working, but, I really want to understand this kind of, areas where they could really right size and do a lot of kind of auto scaling as well with Nerdio.
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind when you're talking about just Azure in general, it's a big ecosystem. There are a lot of different ways to navigate, the end output that your end users will see.
Sure.
The type of hardware, once you have that refresh hardware using IGEL, right, you're going to connect to that virtual device that's sitting in Azure, but now it's a consumption environment, right? So you need to be very particular about what you're pulling in terms of those resources, in terms of the memory and the CPU power that you're pulling. But you also need to be very particular about, power managing those tools, right, to save you on cost, right? I think, if you find, the power management tools that are inherent to Azure could use a boost, but Nerdio brings you that boost, right? In addition to that, aligning with where you need to be for your specific use cases, right? Azure has a plethora of different tools, but sometimes with those different tools, you can kind of get lost in the sauce, right? Knowing if you need to be on 365 versus AVD, Nerdio has sort of calculators to give you an idea of one, the total cost of ownership in an active environment. So you can see if maybe you need to transition to one space or the other. But we also can give you sort of a budgetary idea, of where you should be with our cost calculator, right? Like you were mentioning. So we really do a lot to make sure that you're right sized. If you're over provisioned, under provisioned, or maybe you could even be better provisioned. There are scenarios because Azure is constantly injecting new hardware. There are scenarios where you could be better provisioned, and Nerdio also automates the process of resizing. So when you do that transition, right, Nerdio can really help you align with the specific spend that you need to be making in that consumption environment. So you're not building things out sort of willy-nilly. You can really be very refined about it.
And I'd be remiss, like I mentioned, I think I actually get paid by the amount of times I say AI or things of that nature. Can you tell me about, the optimization you guys do with Nerdio does with Intune? And,
the optimization.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, around Intune, when you're talking about Intune's a big ecosystem in and of itself,
Oh,
right?
no, absolutely. I'm sorry if I made it sound like it was like, oh yeah, that little Intune thing. So my apologies. Go ahead.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking about just optimizing just your Azure infrastructure in general, I mean, speaking to the Intune space a little bit, right? We can give you additional visibility that can be a little bit harder to sort of navigate, right? Especially when you're talking about staying in compliance, especially if you're transitioning from, your old hardware, but you need to make sure that you meet those compliance standards. We're going to give you visibility on compliance. We're going to give you visibility on just your overall Windows updates. Again, we can automate some of that, but you want to know where you're at in terms of that landscape as well. So again, that's sort of a big piece of the puzzle when you're talking about Nerdio and the value that we bring.
Great, thanks so much, Phil. If you want to have a Nerdio or an IGEL demo, guess what? They can reach out to me, but I assume Chris and Phil, you guys are happy to give them a customer demo anytime they're excited to get one and walk them through all these various features. Is that right?
Yeah, most likely we do those quite a bit, whether it's live. I mean, our pre-sales organization, but we also work very closely with our channel partners to empower them to be able to do the same. And I think the big part of it is bringing the solution together. So the prior discussion just a second ago was about the TCO piece, right? In a similar capacity, let's say we've educated a customer, they understand. Okay, there's some value here. We can also do a similar thing, right? Just as all the tools that are happening behind the scenes that Nerdio has done to help you manage your costs in the cloud. And they're pretty impressive. Some of the stuff that wasn't mentioned, but I know I've seen is, maybe over the weekend, you shift your resources to cheaper disks when they're not being used. And then some of these really cool features there's so many different potential features out there that with IGEL, in a similar capacity, there's this is an example we use often that came from a customer, 20,000 endpoints with an ROI of 7 months. Now the savings were on the hardware, about 50% of the hardware, repurposing the hardware.
Wow.
Then it's like, all right, well, what software savings? Well, mentioned earlier, the security posture. You don't need a lot of those security agents that you would normally have on the endpoint to manage Windows and protect it. And all the management tools that go with it. Now, I'll say this, we do have an Intune app that if you want to register your devices in Intune for visibility, you could do that. And so you could have it such for conditional access. We actually have those additional toolings. And then on the operational sides, we literally have customers report like one person is able to manage 20,000 devices. If you're talking about Windows equivalent, it's probably one person for every 300 devices, maybe. So there's tremendous value in bringing both of these things together And certainly from a demo perspective, we've got online videos, we've got person demos, and you guys like to do these workshops too, which is always fun. So.
And Phil, we just did a hands-on demo workshop at both in Houston and in Dallas with Nerdio, which was phenomenal. And what I love and Chris, I know we were talking about this a minute ago, is if I can talk to the end user, if I can find out what they're doing, you guys are able to really kind of tailor that demo to really fit their needs. So I love when they have that come out. And I know I skipped ahead here myself after I've been just telling Chris not to do the exact same thing, but something we can do for our customers that are interested in IGEL, interested in Nerdio. And you don't have to be our customer, obviously. We'd love for you to be a customer, but if you're interested, we can do these things called micro assessments. They're completely free, and we allow us to kind of go in, look at your organization, look at your environment, and really kind of start telling you where the cost savings can come from, where the pain point we can solve for you from these micro assessments. And the thing is, when I first started working here, and I know you both could probably speak to this, I thought a micro assessment was just gonna be like a little 2-page delivery. Really, these are a great way for us to do a deep dive in your organization, what you guys are doing, and where you guys could be with solutions like Nerdio and IGEL. So, with that being said, of course, some additional things that XenTegra can do. If you're not sure about, running Nerdio, if you're not sure about running IGEL, we can actually do that as a managed service for you, for our clients. And these are just some of the many different services we offer, from consulting to managed services. And again, we have quite a number of disciplines, modern workspace, data center, et cetera. And one of my favorite things that we do, and we've been doing quite successfully this year and last year, is Microsoft Fast Track, going to what Phil was talking about, finding out what your licenses are and those types of things. You are already paying, if you have 150 licenses or more with Microsoft, you're already paying for a Fast Track partner. Of the, let's say of all the customers I have, 99% of them don't even know if they have a Fast Track partner, don't even know if that exists. So, definitely you're already paying for it. Talk to XenTegra. We'd love to be your Fast Track partner. We save people so much money through our Fast Track workshops and our interactions that way. We find out licenses that aren't being used, licenses that are misused, right? You might be on a enterprise license when you don't need that. And so there's all types of things that we do there, and it's free. It's all part of your Microsoft license that you're having now, and you're not utilizing it. So we love to have people go out there and really go after the things and to get full value of what you're already paying for as well. So again, I'm going to underline this a dozen more times. Bill and Chris are wanting to do demos with you today. I would love to help you with that. Learn more about XenTegra and tell you about all the wonderful features that we have, all the wonderful ways that we're different. We're that VAR with a heart, and all the reasons why VAR 2.0 really exists. Phil, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. You can reach out to us there at info@XenTegra.com. I can get you connected with any of these people, or DM any of us on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, both in general about the technology or about your environment. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Thank you, JP. Take care.
Thank you.